Her own brothers held her down while the eldest slapped her face until blood filled her mouth. Their crime wasn't punishment. It was business. They had sold her to a 55-year-old stranger who wanted her body as part of a land deal. But when Thomas leaned in to deliver another blow, something inside Sarah Callahan didn't break. It transformed. She drove her knee into his stomach, smashed her elbow into William's nose, grabbed her dead father's pistol, and ran barefoot into a January blizzard. No shoes, no coat, no plan. Just 4 bullets and the desperate will to survive. Miles away, a drifter named Caleb Mallister heard a single gunshot echo across the frozen plains. Most men would have minded their own business. This one rode straight toward the trouble. What he found behind that boulder would change both their lives forever. But here's what will keep you listening until the very end. One of those brothers who held her down will show up at her wedding. And the choice Sarah makes in that moment will determine whether the cycle of pain continues or finally breaks. The lesson. The hands that try to hold you down can never destroy the fire that burns within you. Your worst chapter can become the first page of your greatest story, but only if you refuse to stop fighting. This story is for every woman who has ever been told she was worthless, who has ever been treated like property, who has ever wondered if escape was even possible. Sarah's journey proves that survival is just the beginning. What you build afterward is where your true power lives. If Sarah's courage stirred something in your soul, tap that like button right now. Share your own story of rising from the ashes in the comments, and we read every single one. And if you haven't already, subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss another story of strength, survival, and second chances. Your support means the world to us. The hand swung hard, catching Sarah across the cheek and whipping her head to the side. "You will consent to this marriage," Thomas declared, his voice as bitter as the January wind howling around the Callahan ranch house. "One way or the other." Sarah could taste the blood in her mouth. Her oldest brother, all 32 years of resentment etched deep into his face, loomed right over her, just behind him. William had a tight grip on her left arm while James held her right. They had busted into her room and dragged her out when she locked the door, refusing to sit for supper with Silas Hawkins. He was a 55-year-old rancher who had offered to buy their failing land, but only if Sarah was part of the bargain. "I won't," she whispered, her lips swollen and sore. "I will not marry that man." Thomas seized her by the chin, yanking her face up to meet his cold eyes. "This ranch is on its last legs, Sarah. We have to have Hawkins' money. You are the only thing we've got left to bargain with. I am not a piece of livestock. You are whatever I tell you that you are." His grip grew tighter. "Pa left me in charge when he passed. That means I get to decide what happens to this family. And I have decided that you are marrying Silas Hawkins next Sunday, whether you like it or not. Pa never would have sold me off." The second slap landed even harder than the first. "Pa's dead," Thomas said, his voice flat and empty. "Been gone for 4 years now. It's about time you face that." Sarah's vision blurred. She thought she felt James's grip give a little on her right arm. Her youngest brother was always the gentler one, the one who would look away whenever Thomas turned mean. But he didn't let go. Not one of them let her go. "Hold her still," Thomas commanded. "She needs to learn a lesson about what happens when she defies me." "Thomas," James pleaded, "you shut your mouth." Sarah felt William's fingers dig into her left arm and saw Thomas take a step closer. She knew exactly what he was about to do. 4 years of his growing cruelty had taught her to see the signs. In that moment, something inside her just broke. It was not her spirit, but something different. It was the little part of her that had held on, hoping and believing that her brothers would one day remember that they were blood. That part of her died right there, in the quiet moment before Thomas's hand came down again. And right where it had been, something brand new was born. The will to survive. Sarah brought her knee up with all the force she could muster. Thomas folded in half with a pained grunt, In that split second of shock, she ripped her right arm out of James's weakened grasp and slammed her elbow square into William's nose. And then she ran. She didn't think about a destination. She didn't think about the freezing January air or her bare feet. She wasn't thinking about wearing nothing more than a thin house dress. She simply ran. She flew through the kitchen, right past the hearth where her father's pistol was hanging in its holster, and her hands snatched it without a single thought. "Stop her!" Thomas bellowed from somewhere behind her. Sarah crashed through the back door and out into the biting night. The snow felt like 1,000 tiny knives on her bare feet, but she didn't slow down. The voices chasing her got louder, meaner. "Sarah, you get back in this house!" She whipped around, raised the pistol, and fired a shot straight into the black sky. The sound bounced across the wide-open plains like a clap of thunder. Her brothers stopped dead at the edge of the porch, their shapes dark against the warm yellow light from the house. "You don't follow me," Sarah warned, her voice shaking less than she expected. "I swear to heaven, if you follow me, I will shoot." "You haven't got the nerve," Thomas scoffed. "You just try me." For a long, tense moment, they just stood there. Sarah in the snow, barefoot with a bleeding lip, and her brothers on the porch, weighing their chances. "Fine," Thomas finally spat out. "Go on and run. Let's see how far you get in this cold with no shoes, no money, and nothing but Pa's old gun." His voice was thick with scorn. "You'll be crawling back before sunrise. And when you do, the deal I make with Hawkins is going to be twice as bad for you." Sarah said nothing back. She just turned and disappeared into the darkness, the frozen earth cutting into her feet with every single step. A few miles off, Caleb Mallister was sitting by his campfire on a small hill, looking down at the faraway lights of Medicine Bow. The 30-year-old cowboy had been drifting for 12 long years, ever since the Comanche raid that took his family and left him with just a horse, a rifle, and a whole life of empty trails ahead of him. He had pushed cattle on drives from Texas clear up to Montana and hired on at ranches for a season here and there. But he never put down roots long enough to call any place home. He was thinking that might be about to change. The cattle drive he was on had finished up the day before. By tomorrow he had to make up his mind, either sign on with one of the local ranches to wait out the winter, or just keep riding south to warmer country. He had been leaning toward staying. There was something about this land that felt right, like maybe it was time to stop outrunning old ghosts and start building something new. That distant gunshot sliced right through his thoughts. Caleb's head jerked up. Years of living on the frontier had taught him to tell the difference between sounds. He knew a celebration from a hunt, and he sure knew the sound of trouble. This single shot sounded like something else altogether. It sounded like pure desperation. He listened hard, expecting to hear more shots, maybe the sounds of a fight, but nothing came. There was only that one lonely echo rolling across the frozen land. Now, most folks would have just minded their own business. A shot in the dark could be anything. It might be a rancher scaring off a wolf or some drunk blowing off steam. There were a dozen innocent ways to explain it. The smart play was to stay right there by the fire, stay warm, and stay clear of whatever trouble made that noise. But something about it just pulled at him. Caleb kicked dirt over his fire, gathered his things, and swung up onto his palomino, a tough horse he called Scout. "What do you say we go have a look, boy?" he said quietly, giving the horse a pat on the neck. "Could be nothing. But if it ain't..." He nudged Scout down the hill, heading toward where the sound had come from. Sarah pushed on through the dark, her bare feet leaving a trail of bloody footprints in the snow. She felt like she'd been running for hours, though it was likely less than one. The cold had stolen the feeling from her feet first, then her hands, and was now creeping up her legs until each step felt like wading through thick mud. She could still hear her brothers' voices carried on the wind behind her. They hadn't come after her right away. Thomas had too much pride to chase her down on foot, but she had seen the lanterns light up in the barn as she ran. They were getting the horses. She had to find a place to hide. A small creek appeared up ahead. Its banks were frozen over, but a thin ribbon of water was still moving in the center. Sarah waded right in, sucking in a sharp breath as the icy water soaked what was left of her thin dress. She scrambled across, praying the water would wash away her trail. On the far side, she spotted a large boulder and huddled up against it, the pistol still clutched in her trembling hands. She had 4 bullets left. 4 bullets, no shoes, no coat, and her brothers were out there on horseback somewhere in the night. The sound of hoofbeats approaching made her heart just about stop. She raised the pistol, her finger resting on the trigger. If Thomas found her, she would shoot him. She knew she would. She had to. But the voice that called through the darkness wasn't one of her brothers. "Hello?" It was a man's voice, low and careful. "I heard a gunshot. I'm not looking for any trouble, but I thought maybe someone was hurt." Sarah flattened herself against the cold rock, trying not to even breathe. "I can see tracks leading down to this creek," the voice went on. "Fresh ones. Looks like bare feet." He paused for a moment. "Ma'am, if you're hiding out here, you're going to freeze solid. I don't mean you any harm. I've got a campfire about a mile back. Got blankets and some food. Whatever mess you're running from, I can help." "How do I know that?" Sarah's voice was rough and cracked from the cold. "You don't." The man's voice stayed patient. "But I give you my word as a man, I intend you no harm. I'm just a cowboy passing through. I heard a shot that sounded like trouble, figured I ought to check on it. Most people would just mind their own business." "Well, I reckon I ain't most people." Sarah's hands were shaking so bad she could hardly hold the pistol straight. She was so cold. Her feet were completely numb. If she stayed out here any longer, she was going to die. She slowly, carefully, stepped out from behind the boulder. The moonlight showed a tall man sitting on a palomino horse. He had light brown hair peeking out from under his hat, and his warm brown eyes looked her over without a hint of judgment. She could see his hands clearly. They held no weapon. He took in her whole situation. The bare feet, the blood on her dress, the bruises forming on her face. And something in his expression changed. It wasn't anger at her, she realized. It was anger for her. "My brothers," Sarah heard herself say. "They're coming after me." The cowboy gave a slow nod. "Then we'd best get moving. You can ride with me, but either way, we need to put some distance between you and them." "You'd help a stranger just like that?" "Ma'am, you're standing barefoot in the snow with blood on your face and a pistol in your hand. I reckon the word stranger doesn't quite cover it." He swung down from his horse, pulled a blanket from his saddlebag, and held it out to her. "Name's Caleb Mallister. What do folks call you?" "Sarah," she said, taking the blanket and wrapping it tight around her shivering body. "Sarah Callahan." "Well now, Miss Callahan, it looks to me like you have 2 roads ahead. I can point you back toward town and wish you the best of luck, or you can ride along with me, and we can find a safe place to sort things out." He let that hang in the air for a moment. "It is your call." The faint sound of voices carried on the wind, her brothers hollering her name, and that sealed the deal right there. "I will ride with you," she said, her voice firm. "But this pistol is staying with me." "Fair enough," he said, offering up a hand to help her onto the horse. Sarah took it after a little hesitation, hissing in pain as her numb feet found the stirrup. Caleb settled in behind her, making sure to keep a respectful space between them, even on the single saddle. "Hold on tight," he advised. "We need to cover some ground, and fast." They galloped through the frozen night, sticking to the winding game trails that crisscrossed the hills. Sarah kept glancing over Caleb's shoulder, searching the darkness for any sign of pursuit, but the night had swallowed the world behind them whole. After about an hour, Caleb steered them into a hidden canyon where a small spring bubbled up from the rocks. "We can rest here till sunup," he said, swinging down and offering his hand to help her. "They will never find this spot in the dark, and by the time the sun rises, we will be long gone." Sarah slid off the horse, but the moment her feet touched the ground, her legs buckled completely. Caleb moved like lightning, catching her just before she collapsed. "Easy now," he murmured. "You are in a worse way than you are letting on." "I am fine," she insisted. "With all due respect, ma'am, you are not fine. You are half-frozen solid. You have got cuts that are bleeding, and those feet need to be looked after before a bad infection takes hold." His voice was soft, but it held a core of steel. "Please let me help you." That single word, "please," caught her completely by surprise. When was the last time any man had asked for her permission to do anything? "All right," she whispered, defeated. Caleb led her to a sheltered alcove under a rock overhang and immediately started gathering kindling for a small fire. Sarah just watched him, his movements efficient and quiet, trying to make sense of the kindness this stranger was showing her after the cruelty she had just fled. "Why are you doing all this?" she finally asked. Caleb did not look up from his task. "Doing what? Helping me? You do not even know who I am. You do not owe me a single thing." "No, ma'am, I surely do not." He struck a match and carefully coaxed the tiny flame into a steady fire. But what I heard was a gunshot that sounded an awful lot like desperation. And what I found was a woman nearly dead in the snow, running for her life from her own kin. He sat back on his heels then, and his eyes met hers across the growing flames. "Where I come from, you just do not turn your back on a situation like that." "And where is it you come from?" "I was born and raised in Texas. Lost my whole family when I was just 18. Been wandering ever since." He said it like he was just stating a fact, but Sarah could hear the ancient pain buried deep beneath the words. "I spent 12 long years watching folks just look the other way when something bad was happening. A while back, I decided I was not going to be that kind of man anymore. The fire finally took hold, and a welcome warmth began to fill their little shelter. Caleb dug through his saddlebags and pulled out some jerky, a canteen of water, and a small tin of salve. "For your feet," he said, holding out the tin, "and you had best eat something. I imagine it has been a while." Sarah took what he offered without a word of protest, as she chewed on the tough jerky and rubbed the soothing salve onto her raw feet. The combination of the fire's warmth and this man's simple decency finally broke the dam inside her. Tears started to fall, hot and silent, without any warning. Caleb did not say a word. He just quietly handed her his bandana and then turned to look out at the canyon, giving her the space she needed to let it all out. "I am sorry," Sarah finally choked out after a few minutes. "I do not usually do this. Do not you dare apologize." His voice was low and steady. "You have earned every one of those tears, Miss Callahan, and anyone who tells you otherwise is not worth the dust on your boots." She wiped her eyes and took in a shaky breath. "They were trying to make me marry a man named Silas Hawkins. He is 55 years old, with more money than sense and more land than he has heart. He offered to buy our entire ranch, but only if I was part of the bargain, like I was just another head of cattle. And your brothers went along with this?" "My brothers were the ones who arranged it. Thomas, he is the oldest. He has been getting meaner and meaner ever since our folks passed. Tonight, he decided he was tired of asking nicely." Her voice grew hard as stone. "They held me down. They said they would break my spirit one way or another. I managed to get away before they could do anything worse." "How many brothers do you have?" "3 of them, Thomas, William, and James, and they are still out there searching for you right now." "Yes." Sarah looked him straight in the eye. "I cannot go back, Mr. Mallister. I will not. Then you will not." He said it so simply, as if it were the most obvious fact in the world. "Get some sleep. I will stand watch. You do not have to do that." "Yes, ma'am, I do." He picked up his rifle and leaned back against a large rock where he had a clear view of the canyon entrance. "I cannot tell you what tomorrow will bring, but I can promise you that you are safe for tonight. And right now, that is enough." Sarah just stared at him for a long moment. This complete stranger who rode toward the sound of trouble instead of away from it, who offered his help without asking for anything in return, who had said, "It is your call," as if her choices actually held any weight. "Mr. Mallister, Caleb, my name is Caleb." She tried the name out. Caleb, thank you for believing me, and for not asking a bunch of questions I do not have the answers for yet. He gave a slight tip of his hat, and the shadow of a smile touched his weathered face. Get some rest, Miss Callahan. We have got some big decisions to make in the morning. She had every intention of staying awake, but exhaustion pulled her under within minutes. The very last thing she saw before sleep took her was the silhouette of Caleb against the glowing embers of the fire, his rifle resting across his lap, his gaze fixed on the entrance to the canyon. He was watching over her, keeping her safe, a feeling she had not known in 4 long years. For the first time since her parents had died, she slept without a single nightmare. Dawn arrived, gray and cold, over the canyon rim. Sarah woke up to the smell of brewing coffee and the quiet sounds of Caleb moving around their camp. Her entire body ached in ways she did not even know were possible. When she tried to push herself up, a searing pain shot through her ribs where Thomas had grabbed her. Easy now. Caleb was suddenly right there beside her with a tin cup. Drink this, it will help. She gratefully accepted the coffee, wrapping her frozen fingers around its warmth. In the pale morning light, she could finally see the real state of her feet, cut up and swollen. The salve from the night before was already caked with dirt. "How bad is it?" she asked, her voice raspy. "I have seen worse. Nothing seems to be broken." He knelt down next to her, his hand surprisingly gentle as he examined the damage. "But you will not be walking very far on these today. Looks like we will have to ride double for a bit longer." "I can ride. I have no doubt you can. The real question is where we are riding to." Caleb sat back on his heels. "Your brothers are going to be scouring the countryside. Medicine Bow is too close. They will have folks on the lookout. We could head south, make for Laramie. Try to get you on a train heading east." "East to what?" The words came out sharper than she had meant them to. "I do not have any family back there, no money and no prospects to speak of. You have your life. That is a whole lot more than you had last night." The simple, hard truth in his words silenced her. Caleb was quiet for a minute, poking at the fire with a stick. Then he spoke again. "There is another option. I know some folks in a little town called Silver Creek, about a 2-day ride from here. They're good people, the kind who mind their own business and do not take too kindly to men who mistreat women. Why would a bunch of strangers want to help me? Because that is just what decent people do." He met her gaze directly. "And because I will be the one to speak for you. You hardly even know me, I know enough." He handed her another piece of jerky. "Eat up. We need to get moving soon." They broke down their camp in a hurry, with Caleb expertly wiping away any sign they had ever been there. As he helped Sarah back onto Scout, he saw the man looking hard at the ridgeline, his whole body drawn tight. "What is it?" "Could be nothing." But his hand never strayed far from his rifle. "Let's get going." They had been riding for not even an hour when Caleb suddenly pulled Scout to a halt. "Don't you move," he said in a low voice. "Don't look around, just use your ears." Sarah held her breath. At first, all she could hear was the wind. Then she caught it, the faint clatter of hooves on frozen dirt. More than one horse. "How many?" she whispered. "3, maybe 4, coming up from the east." Caleb's voice was as calm as a Sunday morning, but she could feel the tension coiled up in him. "They're trying to head us off before we reach Silver Creek. My brothers, I expect." He pointed Scout toward a tight opening between 2 hills. "You better hold on." They rode like the devil was chasing them, the cold wind slicing right through Sarah's borrowed blanket. Behind them, the sounds of the chase got louder. A voice she knew all too well rang out across the frozen land. "Sarah, we know you're out there. That was Thomas. There's an old trapper's cabin about a mile up the way," Caleb said. "Got thick walls, a good spot to defend. We'll make our stand there. You can't fight 3 men by yourself. I'm not by myself. You have a pistol, and you told me your daddy taught you how to shoot." He gave her a quick look over his shoulder. "Was that the truth?" "Yes. Well, then, we've got a fighting chance." The cabin came into view through a gap in the trees. It was a small place made of weathered logs with a roof that sagged a bit, but walls that looked solid. Caleb practically lifted Sarah off the horse and shoved her toward the door. "Get inside, find a spot by the window, but keep your head down. What about you?" "I'll get the horses situated and come in the back way. Just don't go shooting me." Even with everything going on, Sarah felt a wild laugh trying to escape. I'll do my best to remember. The inside of the cabin was dusty, but it was all in one piece. Sarah found a place next to the only window where she could watch the clearing. Her hands were shaking as she double-checked the pistol. 4 bullets. 4 little bullets against 3 grown men on horseback. The back door creaked open, and Caleb slipped in, his rifle at the ready. "They'll be here any minute," he said, moving to the other side of the window. "I want you to know, whatever happens from here on out, you don't have to say a thing. I can handle them." "No." He looked over at her, surprise on his face. "They're my brothers," Sarah said. "This is my fight. I'm not going to hide behind you while you do all the talking." Something changed in Caleb's eyes. Maybe it was respect, or maybe he just finally saw her. "All right," he said quietly. "We do this together." The sound of the horses got louder and louder. Through the window, Sarah saw 3 riders break through the trees. Thomas was in the lead, his face a thundercloud of pure fury. William was on his left, rifle held ready, and James was bringing up the rear, a look of uncertainty on his face. "Sarah," Thomas's voice boomed through the clearing, "we know you're in there. Come on out now and we can end this nice and easy." Before Sarah could even think to stop him, Caleb stepped right out the front door. He held his rifle low but ready, standing relaxed but ready for anything. "The lady has made it crystal clear she doesn't want to go with y'all," he called out. "I'd suggest you turn those horses around and head back the way you came." Thomas pulled his horse up short, his eyes narrowing on the stranger. "This is none of your business, mister. We're just looking for our sister. It's family business." "That's a funny way to treat family, holding her down and smacking her around." William shifted in his saddle. James looked down at the ground. "You don't know a thing you're talking about," Thomas snarled. "She's all worked up. Doesn't know what's good for her or for this family. I know exactly what I saw last night." Caleb's voice went hard. "I saw a woman running barefoot in the snow with blood on her face. Where I come from, men who treat their women like that have to answer for it." "Are you making a threat?" "I'm just stating a fact." Thomas's hand started moving toward his rifle. "Step aside, stranger. This is your last warning." "I can't do that." Caleb didn't even flinch. "Miss Callahan asked for my help, and that's what she's got. If you want her, you'll have to come through me." The standoff hung between them, the air crackling like it does right before a lightning strike. Then Sarah stepped out the door. She went to stand right next to Caleb, holding her father's pistol up, her hand steady even though she was trembling inside. The bruises on her face stood out in the morning light, ugly shades of purple and yellow on her pale skin, showing everyone exactly what her brothers had done. "Sarah." Thomas's voice got dangerously low. "You put that thing down and come on home." "No. The ranch needs Hawkins' money. Without it, we're going to lose everything. Then, let us lose it." Sarah's voice got stronger. "I will not throw my life away just to save the ranch. I will not marry a man 3 times my age just because you ran Pa's legacy straight into the dirt. How dare you? How dare I?" She took a step forward, her voice shaking with 4 years of anger she had swallowed down. "How dare you? I love that ranch just as much as you do, Thomas. I would have worked right alongside you to save it, but you never once saw me as a partner. You just saw me as a piece of property to be traded off." She turned her eyes on James, who flinched when she looked at him. "You held me down," she said, her voice quiet. "While Thomas hit me, while he promised to do worse, you held me down and you didn't say a single word. Sarah, James's voice cracked. "Things just got out of hand. I didn't mean for—" "Out of hand?" Sarah's laugh was a bitter sound. "Is that what you call it? I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't fix what you did. Sorry doesn't wipe away the fact that my own brothers were willing to break my spirit to get what they wanted." William shifted in his saddle, looking uncomfortable. "Thomas, maybe we ought to—" "You shut up." Thomas's anger was like a volcano about to blow. "She's twisting you up, just like she always does. Playing the victim, trying to make us look like the monsters. You are monsters." Caleb's voice cut through the tension like a sharp knife. "I've spent 12 years wandering this territory, and I have never seen anything as ugly as 3 men hunting down their own sister like she was some kind of animal." You stay out of this. I'm in it now, and I'm not leaving until I know Miss Callahan is safe." Thomas's face twisted up with rage, his hand gripping his rifle tighter. "Last chance, stranger. Ride away now, and this doesn't have to get bloody. I've seen my share of bloody situations before." Caleb's voice was as steady as a rock. "Have you?" That question just hung there in the cold air. Sarah looked at her brothers. Thomas was boiling with rage. William looked torn, and James looked like he'd rather be anywhere else on earth. "Thomas," James spoke up, his voice shaking, Maybe she's right. Maybe we took this too far. Don't you start with that. Look at her face, Thomas. Look at what we did." James's voice got stronger. "Pa would have never stood for this. You know he wouldn't have. Pa's dead. That doesn't mean we get to throw out everything he taught us." James turned to Sarah, and there were tears in his eyes. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I should have stopped him. I should have—" "Don't," Thomas warned him. "Don't you dare take her side. There aren't any sides," James shouted. "There's just family, and we've gone and destroyed it." His words echoed in the quiet clearing. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then William spoke, his voice quiet but firm. "He's right, Thomas. This has gone on long enough. She's our sister. She's a commodity. She's the only thing that's standing between us and being ruined." "No." William shook his head slowly. "She's our sister, and we've been treating her like she was livestock." He looked at Sarah, shame written all over his face. "I'm sorry, too. For whatever that's worth." Thomas just stared at his brothers like they'd both grown a second head. "You're both fools," he spit. "Without that Hawkins money, the ranch is done for. Then let it be done for." Sarah lowered her pistol just a little. "I would rather have no home at all than be married to a man who thinks of me as part of a business deal. I would rather die out here in the snow than live in that house for one more day." The words just hung there in the freezing air. Thomas's hand tightened on his rifle. For one awful second, Sarah thought he was actually going to shoot. But then something in his face just broke. It wasn't regret. Thomas wasn't capable of that. It was something like understanding, the moment he realized he had already lost. "Fine." The word came out of him like a curse. "You've made your bed. Don't you come crawling back to us when you realize what you've thrown away." He spun his horse around and rode back the way he came, without a single look back. William paused for a second, then he followed. But James stayed. "Sarah," he said, his voice cracking again, "I know you can't forgive me. I don't deserve it. But I want you to know. I'll make sure Thomas doesn't come looking for you. I'll keep an eye on him. If he tries anything, I'll send you a warning. And how am I supposed to believe that? You're not. I haven't earned your trust." James swallowed hard. "But maybe I can start earning it back now." He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a small bundle. It was Sarah's boots, a coat, and a worn leather pouch. "I grabbed these before we left. I figured you might be needing them." He held the bundle out. "There's some money in the pouch. It's not a whole lot, but it's enough to help you get on your feet." Sarah stared at the bundle, and then she looked at her youngest brother. "Why? Because I should have stopped them." James's voice broke completely. "Because you're my sister, and I failed you, and this is the only way I know how to even start making it right." Caleb stepped forward and took the bundle from him. "We'll take this, but don't you mistake it for trust." "I don't." James looked at Sarah one last time. "I'll write to you at the post office in Silver Creek, if that's where you're headed. You don't have to write back, but I'll write. And maybe someday—" He couldn't finish the sentence. Sarah watched him turn his horse and ride off after their brothers. Something in her chest hurt. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it might have been the first tiny seed of something that could grow into forgiveness one day. "You all right?" Caleb asked her quietly. "I don't know." She wrapped her arms around herself. I thought I was going to have to fight them or even kill them. I never once thought model. They would have just left." Your words hit them harder than any bullet could have. You forced them to see the kind of men they were becoming. James saw it. I think William might have too. Thomas, she said, shaking her head. Thomas will never see anything that he does not want to see. Then we just keep moving. We will put as much country between you and him as we possibly can. Caleb held up the bundle that James had left for her. But first things first, let's get you into a proper pair of boots. The rest of that day was a long blur of steady riding. Caleb led them along forgotten back trails and hidden paths, staying far away from the main roads where Thomas might be watching. Sarah's new boots were a godsend, and the coat kept the biting cold from seeping into her bones. But pure exhaustion was starting to set in. Every single time she closed her eyes, she saw Thomas's face, heard his angry voice, felt the sting of his hand across her cheek. "Whoa," Caleb said, his voice pulling her from the daze. Sarah jolted awake in the saddle. "What is wrong? You have been shaking like a leaf for the last hour. We need to stop and rest." "I am fine." "No, ma'am, you are not." His voice was gentle but left no room for argument. "And pretending that you are is not going to do either of us any good." They stopped in a small grove of trees that offered some shelter, and Caleb quickly built another small fire. Sarah huddled as close to the flames as she dared, trying to soak their warmth deep into her soul. "Can I ask you something?" Caleb said after they had sat in silence for a while. "You can always ask. Cannot promise I will have an answer." "Fair enough." He poked at the fire with a long stick. "Why did you not fight back against them sooner? You have got a fighter's spirit in you. I have seen it clear as day. Why did you wait until last night to finally run?" Sarah was quiet for a long time, staring into the flames. "Because they are my brothers," she said at last, her voice barely a whisper. "Because after our folks died, they were the only family I had left in the world. I just kept thinking that if I tried a little harder, if I was just good enough or patient enough, that they would eventually remember that we were supposed to be family." Her voice cracked on the last word. "I was wrong. You were not wrong for hoping. You were wrong for ever thinking that their cruelty was somehow your fault." The simple truth of his words hit her like a physical blow. "I know that. In my head, I know you are right, but in here," she pressed a hand flat against her chest, "in my heart, it is a lot harder to believe." Caleb nodded his head slowly. "After I lost my family, I spent years going over what I could have done differently. If only I had been there. If I had been faster, or stronger, or smarter. It took me a long, long time to finally understand that some things just happen, and all a person can do is find a way to survive them." "Does it ever get easier?" she asked. "The surviving part?" "Yes," he answered. "The remembering, though." He met her eyes across the fire. "That part never really goes away. But it does get softer over time. The sharp edges start to wear down. And after a while, you start to find things that make life worth living again. Such as, I am still working that out." A faint smile touched his lips. "But making sure you get to a safe place feels like a mighty fine place to start." They sat there for a good while in a comfortable quiet, just watching the flames die down. Caleb. "Yeah. Thank you for taking my word for it, for not just leaving me out there. This was not about taking your word. Anybody with eyes could tell you were running from something awful." He gave a little shrug. "It was about doing the right thing. That does not require you to believe somebody. Most folks would not see it that way. Most folks have not been through what I have." He got to his feet, dusting the snow from his breeches. "Get some sleep. We have another long day of riding ahead before we make it to Silver Creek." "What is in Silver Creek?" "A chance, and maybe a little more." He gave her a look, but his expression was impossible to read. "We will find out when we get there." Sarah pulled her coat and the blanket tight around herself, huddling close to the fire. Sleep was coming for her, like it or not. The very last sound she heard was Caleb settling down in his spot by the horse, his rifle resting on his lap, watching over her yet again. She was getting used to that feeling. She just was not sure if it scared her to death or gave her a glimmer of hope. Silver Creek finally came into view on the afternoon of their third day, tucked away in a valley with snow-dusted mountains rising up behind it. Sarah had never laid eyes on a mining town before. The main street was a mess of mud and activity, crowded with men bundled in thick coats and women dashing from one shop to the next. Smoke curled up from the chimneys, and you could hear the steady clang of hammers coming from somewhere close by. "It is not much," Caleb said while they rode down the center of town, "but the folks here are decent people. That is what counts." People stared as they passed, a trail-weary cowboy and a bruised woman sharing a single horse. Sarah felt the heat of their gazes and had to fight the urge to cover her face. "Let them stare," Caleb said in a low voice, almost like he could read her mind. "You have not got a single thing to be ashamed of. That is easy for you to say." "No, it is not." He steered Scout over to a plain-looking hotel. "But it is the God's honest truth." Anyway, he helped her down from the horse and walked her toward the entrance, keeping one hand near her elbow, but never quite making contact. The gesture felt protective, not like he was claiming ownership, and Sarah found she was thankful for that difference. Inside, a man with a balding head glanced up from his spot behind the front desk. "Mr. Mallister, it has been a spell." "Mr. Jenkins," Caleb replied with a nod. "I'm going to need 2 rooms, and maybe you could tell me if that Mitchell place is still on the market." Jenkins's eyes quickly darted over to Sarah, taking in her bruises, her tattered dress, and the pure exhaustion etched on her face. To his credit, he kept his mouth shut. "I can get you the rooms. As for the Mitchell place, you would have to go talk to Mr. Holloway down at the bank." He pushed 2 keys across the wooden counter. "Supper is at 6. Mrs. Jenkins makes a pretty good stew." "Much obliged." As they were heading up the stairs, Sarah finally worked up the nerve to ask the question that had been nagging at her for 2 solid days. "What is the Mitchell place?" Caleb did not answer for a second. "It is a ranch, a small one, around 300 acres. Old Bill Mitchell has been trying to sell it for about a year now. He wants to move back east and live with his daughter." He paused at a door and offered her a key. "I have been giving some thought to buying it." "You. 12 years of drifting from place to place is long enough. Maybe it is about time I put down some roots." He looked her right in the eye. "And I figured maybe you could use a fresh start yourself." "I do not understand. I am not asking for a thing, Sarah. But if you were interested..." He paused for a moment, searching for the right words. "If you wanted to stay on in Silver Creek, I could surely use a partner. Somebody who understands cattle and knows their way around ranch work. You would earn every bit of your share. It would not be some kind of handout." The offer just hung there in the air between them like a question. "Why would you do something like that for me?" "Because it is the right thing to do." His voice was firm. "And because I have spent 12 years all by myself, and I am getting tired of it. That does not mean I am asking for anything more than a partnership." He just shrugged. "Just a chance to build something new instead of running away from something old." Sarah just stared at him, trying to find the catch. There had to be a catch. Men did not make offers like this without expecting something back. But Caleb's face showed nothing but pure honesty. "I need some time to think on it," she finally said. "Take all the time you need. I am not going anywhere." He gave a little tip of his hat and then vanished into his own room, leaving Sarah all alone with her thoughts. She sat down on the edge of the bed, her father's pistol resting in her lap, and tried to picture what a future might look like. A week ago, she was a prisoner inside her own house. 3 days ago, she was running for her life through the snow with no shoes on. Now, a man she barely knew was offering her a partnership, a piece of property, a life she could choose for herself. It was too much. It came too fast, and it sounded way too good to be true. But still, a little part of her, the part that had somehow survived 4 years of her brother's meanness, that had found the grit to escape, that had stood before that cabin and made her brothers look at what they had turned into, that little part whispered back, "Maybe this is exactly what you have been waiting for. A knock on the door made her nearly jump out of her skin. "Miss Callahan!" It was a woman's voice, one she did not recognize. "Mr. Mallister sent me over. My name is Martha Crane. I own the seamstress shop just down the street." Sarah opened the door and saw a tall woman, probably in her 50s. Streaks of silver ran through her black hair, which was tied back in a respectable bun. Her eyes were sharp as a tack, but also kind, and they took in Sarah's state with the same lack of judgment Mr. Jenkins had shown. "Lord have mercy, child," Martha said. "You look like you have been dragged through hell backwards, something like that. Well, you come on with me. We are going to get you all cleaned up and into some proper clothes. Whatever trouble brought you to this town, you do not have to face it looking like a refugee. I am a refugee." "Well then, we will just make sure nobody can tell." Martha took her by the arm with a gentle but firm grip that did not invite any argument. "In Silver Creek, we look after our own, Miss Callahan, and for as long as you are here, you are one of us now." Martha's shop was toasty warm and had the pleasant smell of clean cloth. She worked fast, finding Sarah a simple but finely made blue dress that fit her better than anything she had worn in years. "You are from Medicine Bow Way," Martha remarked as she worked on the hem. "I can tell by the sound of your voice. My own family has a ranch down there. You had one, and you left. I got away." Martha's hand stopped moving for a heartbeat. Then she went right back to her stitching. "I have seen women who got away before. Their stories were different, but the look in their eyes was the same." She glanced up at Sarah. "Mr. Mallister is a good man, one of the finest I have ever known. If he brought you to this place, it is because he thinks you are worth helping." "I am not so sure that I am." "Well then, let us show you that you are." Martha snipped the final thread and took a step back to look at her handiwork. "There now, you look like a woman with a bright future ahead, not one running from a dark past." Sarah stared at her reflection, and hardly knew the woman looking back. The bruises were still there, but they now looked like proof of her survival instead of marks of shame. "Thank you," she whispered. "You can thank me by building a good life here." Martha's voice grew gentle. "Whatever it was that happened to you, that does not get to define you. What you choose to do from this day on, that is what truly matters." The next morning, Caleb escorted Sarah to meet Bill Mitchell. The old rancher was just as Caleb had described him, 70 years old, with a white beard and weathered hands that told stories of decades of hard labor. He showed them around his property with a quiet sense of pride, the house, the barn, and the cattle grazing on the winter grass. 300 acres, Bill stated. "It has good water all year long and decent grazing land. I am asking 1,800, and that includes the stock and all the equipment." "That is a fair price," Caleb said. "More than fair. I am not looking to wring every last cent out of it." Bill's sharp eyes shifted between the two of them. "What I am hoping for is to find buyers who will respect what I have built here, not just people who will use up the land and then move along." "I have been wandering for 12 years, Caleb answered, searching for a place to finally settle down. "This feels like it might just be the one." "And the lady?" Sarah stood up a little straighter under his look. "I was raised on a ranch. I know cattle and I know the work. If Mr. Mallister will have me as his partner, I intend to earn every bit of my share." Bill looked her over for a long, quiet moment. Then, to her surprise, a smile broke across his face. "You have got some fire in you, I can see that." He stuck out his hand toward Caleb. "You have got yourself a ranch, Mr. Mallister. That is, provided the lady here is in agreement." Every eye in the room turned to Sarah. This was it, the decision she had been wrestling with since Caleb first made the offer. She could say no, take the money James had given her, and try to make a new start somewhere else, all alone. Or she could put her trust in a stranger who heard her scream and came running. A man who had put himself between her and her brothers and asked for nothing in return. A man who said, "Your choice," as if those words actually held some weight. "I agree," she said. Bill's handshake was strong and quick. "Welcome to your new home, Miss Callahan." Those words struck her with more force than she had anticipated. Home. She had not had a real home in 4 long years. Perhaps she was finally about to build one. The weeks that came after were a whirlwind of constant hard work. Caleb took care of all the legal documents with Mr. Holloway, while Sarah spent her time with Bill, learning every single corner of the property. The old rancher was a patient instructor, pointing out the prime grazing areas, the little quirks of the water pump, and the story behind every structure. My wife, Margaret, she planted that garden, he mentioned one afternoon, gesturing to a little overgrown plot behind the main house. I just have not had the heart to tend to it since she passed away. I could fix it up, Sarah offered, when springtime comes. A softness came into Bill's eyes. I would like that very much, and he knew she would do it too. By the time Bill left for California with a firm handshake for Caleb and a surprisingly warm hug for Sarah, they had settled into a steady routine. Caleb was in charge of the heavy ranch duties and negotiating with the cattle buyers. Sarah took care of the house, the planning for the garden, and keeping all the financial records straight. They were partners, strictly business partners. That was it. But she could feel something beginning to shift. Sarah started to see it in small things at first, like the way Caleb's gaze would rest on her when he thought she was not aware, or the way his hand would accidentally brush against hers as he passed her the coffee pot, or how he always made certain she had the more comfortable chair next to the fireplace. She began to notice it inside herself as well. The little flutter she felt in her chest whenever he smiled. The way she started making up reasons just to be in the same room with him. The pang of disappointment she felt every single night when he went to his own room, keeping the proper distance that Martha Crane had insisted on. "You are not a married couple," Martha had told her plainly on Sarah's first day, "and that means separate rooms. I will not have folks in town gossiping about any impropriety." They had abided by her rules. Caleb slept in the smaller bedroom on the main floor, while Sarah took the larger one upstairs. They ate their meals together, worked side by side, and talked late into the night, but always with a careful space kept between them. It was slowly driving Sarah crazy. One evening, about 6 weeks after they had taken over the ranch, Sarah was sitting by the fire as Caleb was repairing a harness. The easy silence stretched on between them until she just could not stand it any longer. "Can I ask you a question?" Caleb glanced up from his work. "Always. When you first offered me this partnership, was it just because you needed someone who knew about cattle?" He was silent for a good long while, his hands frozen on the piece of leather. "No," he said at last. "It was not only about that." "Then what was it about?" Caleb put the harness down and turned to face her directly. "When I heard that gunshot, something inside me said to ride toward it, not away from it. When I found you, something told me I had to help you, not just walk away. And when I saw you stand up to your own brothers," his voice grew a little hoarse, "something told me that you were a person worth getting to know better. That is not really much of an answer. It is the only one I have for you right now." He looked straight into her eyes. "I am not going to pretend that I do not feel something for you, Sarah. But you have been through a living hell. The very last thing you need is some cowboy making demands on you before you have even had a chance to heal." "What if I am not looking for demands? What if I'm looking for—" She trailed off, not knowing how to say what she meant. "For what?" "I do not know." The words came out in a small voice. "I do not know what it is I am looking for. All I know is that when I am with you, I feel safe. I feel like my old self again. Like maybe the person I used to be before my brothers broke me down is not entirely gone." Caleb walked across the floor and knelt down in front of her chair, close enough to reach out, but he did not. "She is not gone," he said in a low voice. "I have seen her. She is the woman who ran through a blizzard with just a pistol and a prayer. She is the woman who stood on the porch of that cabin and made 3 armed men back down using nothing but the power of her own voice." His hand floated near her cheek. "May I?" Sarah gave a slight nod. His palm felt warm and rough against her skin. She found herself leaning into his touch, closing her eyes. "I will not rush you," Caleb said. "Whatever this thing is between us, we will figure it out together, at your own speed. What if I do not know what my speed is? Then we will just take it slow until you do." He leaned in and pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead, and nothing else. Then he stood up. "Get some rest. We have got cattle to move in the morning." He was gone before she could even think of a reply, the door to his room shutting with a quiet click. Sarah sat there by the embers of the fire, her hand resting on the spot where his lips had touched her. Something was definitely changing between them, and for the first time in many years, she was not afraid of it. A letter from James showed up 2 weeks later. Sarah knew his handwriting on the envelope right away and felt her stomach tighten into a knot. She had been expecting it. He had promised he would write, but knowing something is coming and actually facing it are two entirely different matters. She opened it with hands that were slightly shaking. "Dear Sarah," she read out loud, her voice just a little more than a whisper. "I hope this letter finds you well and in a safe place. I have thought of you every single day since we went our separate ways, and I have come to see how terribly I failed you." Caleb had appeared in the doorway, but he did not say a word, just leaned against the frame and listened. "Thomas has left for Cheyenne. He sold his part of the ranch to William and me. He said there was not anything left for him here, but I believe the real reason is that he could not bear to stay in a place where everyone knew what he had done." Sarah looked up at Caleb. "He is gone. Just keep reading." She went back to the letter. "William and I are doing our best to save the ranch without Hawkins' money. It is a struggle, but we are making it work. We have started raising sheep on the west pasture, just like Mr. Mallister suggested. The early signs are looking good. You talked to William about sheep." Caleb just shrugged. It seemed like a sensible idea for their circumstances. Having a mixed operation can help you with the weather, market changes. It is just better all around. Sarah shook her head in disbelief and kept on reading. "I know that I have no right at all to ask you to forgive me. What I did and what I let happen to you was unforgivable. But I need you to know that I'm trying to be the kind of brother you always deserved. The brother I should have been from the start. He is not the one who hurt you the most," Caleb pointed out quietly. "No, but he was the one who held me down while Thomas did it." Sarah's voice was completely empty of emotion. "That is not nothing. No, it is not. But people are capable of changing. Are they really?" Caleb came over and sat down next to her. "I have changed. 12 years ago, I was just a boy who had lost everything he had, and I did not know how to go on living. Now I am a man who heard a gunshot in the middle of the night and rode toward it instead of running away from it." He gently took her hand in his. "If I can change, then maybe he can too." Sarah looked at the letter in her lap for a long time. "I do not forgive him," she said at last, "not right now, and maybe I never will. That is your choice to make. But I think I will write him back. I will tell him that I am safe, that I am building a new life for myself out here." She looked over at Caleb. "And that I am not alone anymore." His fingers gave her hand a gentle squeeze. "You are not," he agreed. "And you will never have to be again." Sarah wrote her reply that very night, sitting at the old wooden desk Bill Mitchell had left for them. The words were hard to find at first, but then they started to flow as she found her way. She told James all about Silver Creek, about the ranch, and about Caleb, though she chose her words carefully when she described him. A partner, a friend, a protector. She told him about Martha Crane and her dress shop, about Mr. Holloway over at the bank, and about the whole community that had welcomed her without a single question. She did not tell him that she was happy. That felt like too much to admit, too soon. But she did tell him she was healing, and that part was true. As she sealed up the envelope, a tightness in her chest seemed to let go. It was a burden she had not even realized she was carrying. "Finished?" Caleb asked from the doorway. "Finished," she said, holding up the letter. "Will you mail this tomorrow when you head into town?" "Of course." He walked over to take it from her, and his hand lingered over hers for a moment. "How are you feeling?" "Strange. Like I have just closed a door that I was not entirely sure I wanted to shut." Some doors have to be closed before new ones have a chance to open. She looked up at him. This man who had ridden straight toward trouble instead of turning away from it, who had offered her a partnership instead of making demands, who had shown her patience when that was the very last thing she ever expected to receive. Caleb. Yeah, I think I am ready. Ready for what? To find out what was waiting on the other side. A smile spread across his weathered face, making him look almost beautiful. He said, "Then I reckon we find out together." He truly kissed her this time. It was not a simple touch on the forehead, not gentle or shy. It was a kiss full on the lips, filled with a hunger that showed her he had been waiting for this moment just as long as she had. When they finally pulled apart, they were both breathing heavily. Sarah let out a laugh. "What is it?" Caleb asked. "Nothing. It is just—" She laid her hand against his chest, feeling his heart pounding under her palm. "I never imagined that running through the snow with bare feet would end up like this." He told her, "Life has a funny way of working out." He kissed her again, but this time it was softer. Sometimes the very worst nights can lead to the very best mornings. Is that what this is? A good morning? I would say it is the beginning of one. He pulled her into his arms, and she fit against him perfectly, as if she had always been meant to be there. The beginning of a whole lot of good mornings, if you will have them. "I will have them," Sarah whispered back. "Every last one of them." Outside, a fresh snow began to fall, laying a clean white blanket over their small ranch. Inside, two souls who had found one another in the dark started to build something new in the light. Spring made its way slowly, melting the snow and turning the hard, frozen earth into something that felt full of promise. Sarah had been living at the ranch for 3 months now, and the change in her was incredible. The bruises on her skin were completely gone. Her feet were fully healed. The haunted shadow that had lived in her eyes had softened into a gentle warmth, a look that made Caleb's chest feel tight whenever he saw her smile. They fell into a daily rhythm that felt as easy and natural as taking a breath. Caleb tended to the cattle and mended fences during the day. Sarah took care of the house, started preparing a garden, and managed the ranch's financial books. In the evenings, they would sit near the fireplace, talking about big things and small things. They were slowly getting to know the true shape of each other's hearts. That one kiss had certainly changed things. It had opened a door that neither of them wanted to shut, but they took things slow, with great respect, building a foundation of trust, right alongside their growing affections. "We probably ought to talk about the future," Caleb said one evening. He put down the leather harness he had been fixing. Sarah looked up from the ledger she was working on. "What about it?" "Martha Crane pulled me aside in town today. She was asking when we were planning on getting married." Those words just hung there in the quiet room. "What did you say to her?" "That I had not asked you yet." Caleb's voice was steady, but Sarah could see the tightness across his shoulders. "I figured that was something you should be the first to hear. So, are you asking me now?" "I am asking if you would want me to." Sarah put her pen down on the desk. "Caleb Mallister, that is the most roundabout proposal I have ever come across. I am not proposing. I am asking if you would even want me to propose. There is a big difference. Is there really?" "Yes." He walked across the room and knelt down by her chair the same way he had all those weeks ago when he had first touched her face. "I promised I would not rush you into anything. I meant every word of that. But I also cannot keep pretending that I do not want more than just a partnership now. What is it that you want?" "Everything." The word sounded raw and honest. "I want to wake up next to you every single morning and fall asleep with you every night. I want to build this ranch with you, raise a family with you, grow old with you." He took both of her hands in his. "I want you, Sarah, all of you, for the rest of my days." Sarah could feel tears starting to well up in her eyes. "Well, that sure sounds like a proposal to me." "Maybe it is." He gave her fingers a gentle squeeze. "What do you say?" She just looked at him. This was the man who had heard her terrified screams and came running. The man who had put himself between her and danger without ever asking for a single thing. Who had offered her a partnership when she had absolutely nothing to give him but her own broken self. Yes, she whispered. Yes, yes, I will marry you. Yes, I want every single thing you just said. Her voice got stronger with each word. Yes to all of it. A huge grin spread across Caleb's face, the biggest one she had ever seen on him. He pulled her right out of the chair and into his arms, sweeping her off her feet and spinning her around and around until she felt dizzy from laughing. I love you, he said, once he finally set her back down. I do not think I have said that out loud yet, but I do. I love you, Sarah Callahan. I love you too. She pulled his head down for a kiss that left both of them completely breathless. I love you, Caleb Mallister. Soon to be Sarah Mallister, he murmured right against her lips. Soon to be. The news that they were getting married spread all through Silver Creek faster than a prairie fire. Martha Crane immediately took over all the arrangements, declaring that a proper wedding was going to need proper planning. She showed up at the ranch, loaded down with fabric swatches, ideas for the menu, and a long list of tasks that had to be finished before the big day. A summer wedding, Martha announced. Early July. That will give us 3 months to get this done right. We were thinking of something a little simpler, Sarah tried to say. Nonsense. After everything you have been through, you deserve a real celebration. Martha's whole expression softened. Let this town show you just how much you have come to mean to all of us. Sarah glanced over at Caleb, who just gave a helpless shrug. I have learned it is best not to argue with Martha Crane, he said. Fine. Sarah gave in with a smile. July it is. Letters from James kept coming every couple of weeks. The tone in them slowly changed from being full of apologies to something much warmer. He gave her updates on the ranch, shared news about the neighbors, and carefully asked questions about her new life in Silver Creek. She wrote back to him every single time, with her own letters becoming more and more open. She told him all about the engagement, about the little garden she was starting, and about the wonderful community that had taken her in. Then, late in April, another letter showed up, but this one was different. It was from William. Sarah knew his formal handwriting on the envelope right away and felt her stomach twist into a knot. William had never written to her before. Whatever made him start now, it could not be good news. What does it say? Caleb asked, watching her face closely. Sarah read it out loud. Dear Sarah, I am writing to you with news that I believe you ought to hear from family instead of from strangers. Thomas is dead. He was killed during a saloon fight up in Cheyenne 3 weeks ago. From what they say, he had been drinking quite a bit and said something he should not have to the wrong fellow. The burial was small. James and I were the only ones there. I am sorry if this news brings you any pain, but I felt you had a right to know. Your brother, William. A heavy silence settled over the kitchen. Sarah. Caleb came to stand beside her. How are you feeling? I do not know. She placed the letter on the table, her hands shaking just a little. He was my brother. A part of me feels like I should be grieving. And the other part? The other part remembers what he did to me, what he was about to do. Her voice became hard as stone. He held me down, Caleb. He hit me over and over until I gave up fighting. He was going to break my spirit just so he could sell me off to a man 3 times my age. That does not mean you cannot be sad for the person he should have been. That simple thought cut right through all her confusion. Sarah felt tears finally roll down her cheeks. They were not for Thomas, as he was, but for the brother he could have been if their parents had not passed away. If all that bitterness had not eaten him alive. If he had just made different choices. I am sad, she said at last. Not for him, but for what we all lost so long ago. The family we could have been. Caleb just held her while she cried, not offering any empty words of comfort, just staying right there with her. Once the crying stopped, Sarah wiped her face and stood up straight. I ought to write to James and William, just to let them know I got the news. What are you fixin' to tell them? The plain truth. That I am sorry for what they have lost. That I hope they can find some peace. She looked him right in the eye. And that I will not be coming to any service. That part of my life is over and done with. Are you certain about that? Yes. Her voice was firm now. Thomas made his own bed. He chose being cruel over being kind, and his pride over his own family. I will not stand there and act like those choices did not mean anything, just because he is gone now. Some folks might say you ought to forgive. Some folks have not walked a mile in my shoes. Sarah gently touched his cheek. I have done all the forgiving I can. James gets it because he is trying to be a better man. William gets it because he was always a follower, not a leader. But Thomas, she just shook her head. Thomas left this world the same way he lived in it, full of anger, all alone, and hurting anyone who got too close. I will not pretend otherwise. Caleb nodded his head slow. You are a whole lot stronger than you think. I am learning to be. The wedding was planned for July 4th. Martha Crane had been firm on the date. Independence Day, she had said, seemed about right for a woman who had finally won her own freedom. Sarah had to laugh at that, but she could not deny there was a certain poetry to it. As the day got closer, a second letter showed up from James. This one felt different. Dear Sarah, it said, I hope this letter finds you doing well. I have some news I wanted to share myself before you heard it from someone else. I have met a lady. Her name is Rebecca Turner. She is the new school teacher over in Medicine Bow. We have been seeing each other for about 3 months now, and I reckon I might ask for her hand before long. I needed you to know, because for the very first time I truly understand why you chose freedom over just being safe. Some things are worth taking a chance on. I hope you will get to meet her one of these days. I think y'all would like each other. With love, James. Sarah read the letter not once but twice, a real smile spreading over her face. Is that good news? Caleb asked, standing in the doorway. James has found himself someone, a schoolteacher named Rebecca, the brother who said he was sorry. Yes, he says he finally understands why I ran away. Sarah folded the letter up real careful. I think he has truly changed, Caleb. I think that maybe, just maybe, we could actually feel like a family again someday. Is that something you would want? I do not rightly know. She thought about the question for real. A part of me will always remember him holding me down. But another part of me remembers the boy he was before our parents passed on. The brother who knew how to make me laugh. People are made of all sorts of things. What was that? It is something my mother always used to say. People are made of all sorts of things. They can be mean and they can be good, they can be brave and they can be cowards all at the same time. He walked over to stand right there beside her. Maybe your brother is made of all sorts of things too. Maybe so. Sarah leaned her head on his shoulder. I am not ready to see him yet, but I think I am ready to keep writing him letters. That is enough for right now. A week before they were set to be married, James rode into Silver Creek. Sarah was out in her garden when she spotted the rider coming down the road, a young fellow on a bay horse. He sat tall in the saddle, looking unsure but determined. She knew who it was in an instant. Caleb, she called out, her voice all tight. He came out of the barn, saw the rider, and came to stand right next to her. His hand just rested on the revolver at his hip, looking casual, but he was ready. James pulled up his horse a ways off, showing respect, and took off his hat. Sarah. His voice sounded tired. I know I should not have come without sending word, but I wanted to. I needed to see you before the wedding, to make sure you were truly doing all right. You could have written a letter. I could have, but some things have to be said to a person's face. Sarah just looked at him. At 22, James looked much older, and you could see the burden of the last few months in the lines around his eyes. He looked like a man who had been doing some hard thinking. Well, say what you came here to say then, she told him quietly. James swung down from his horse, but did not come any closer. I am sorry. The words sounded raw coming out of him. I know I have said it before, but I need to say it again, looking right at you, so you know that I mean it with all my heart. What I did, what I just stood by and let happen, was wrong. It was unforgivable. I am not asking you to forgive me, I just need you to know that I will spend the rest of my days trying to be the kind of brother I should have been all along. Those are just pretty words. They are more than words. James reached into his saddlebag and took out a small bundle wrapped up in cloth. Pa's watch, the one Ma gave him on their wedding day. I took it after he died, figured I would give it to my first son one day. But it ought to be yours. He held it out toward her. Sarah did not even flinch. I do not want it, Sarah. That watch belongs to a family that is gone now. A family that fell apart the night you held me down while Thomas tried to break my spirit. James looked like he had been slapped. I know that. I cannot take back what was done. But, his voice cracked a little, you are my sister, the only one I have got, and I do not want to lose you for good. You already lost me. Sarah's voice was as cold as a winter morning. You lost me the day you picked Thomas over me. When you stood there and watched him hurt me, and you did absolutely nothing to make him stop. I was scared. So was I. But I did not hold you down while somebody else beat on you. The truth of her words just hung there in the air between them. James hung his head down low. You are right. There is nothing I can say to defend it. I was a coward, and my being a coward brought you so much pain. He looked back up with tears shining in his eyes. But I am trying to change. I am trying to become a better man. Does that not count for anything at all? Sarah was quiet for a long time. Behind her, she could feel Caleb's presence, solid and supportive, ready to step in if she needed him to. But this was not his fight to finish. It was hers. Yes, she finally said. It counts for something. It is not forgiveness. I am not there yet. But it is an acknowledgement. You are trying, I can see that. Does that mean? It means I will not send you packing. You can stay for the wedding if you like, but you will get a room at the hotel in town, and you will keep your distance until I feel ready to talk some more. That is more than I have a right to ask for. Yes, it is. Sarah pulled her shoulders back. But you are my brother, and no matter what has happened, that still means something to me. James nodded slowly, wiping at his eyes with his sleeve. Thank you, Sarah, for giving me another chance. Do not you make me regret it. She turned around and started walking back to the house without a single glance back. Caleb fell in step right beside her. You doing all right? He asked in a low voice. I will be. She looked over her shoulder one time at James, who was leading his horse down the road toward town. He really is trying, is he not? Seems that way. I hate that I still have a piece of my heart that cares for him after everything he did. He is your blood. Some ties just do not break easy, even when they probably should. Is that just wisdom, or is it foolishness? Caleb smiled a little. Maybe it is a bit of both. The wedding day came up clear and warm. Sarah stood in Martha's back room wearing a simple dress of pale blue that the seamstress had been working on for months. Her hands were shaking as she smoothed down the front of it. You look absolutely beautiful, Martha said from the doorway. I do not feel beautiful. I feel scared to death. Every bride does. Martha came over to her side. But you are not just marrying a man today. You are claiming a life that you chose for yourself. That is something worth being a little nervous about. What if I am making a terrible mistake? Is Caleb Mallister a good man? Yes. Does he love you? Yes. Do you love him? Sarah thought about Caleb. His steady way, his quiet strength, the way he had heard her scream and came running when any other man would have just ridden on by. Yes, more than I ever thought I could love somebody. Then it is not a mistake. Martha squeezed her hand tight. It is a beginning. The ceremony took place at the little church in Silver Creek. It felt like the whole town had turned out for it, miners, shopkeepers, and ranchers from all the properties nearby. They filled up the pews and spilled out into the churchyard, all of them there to watch Sarah Callahan become Sarah Mallister. James sat in the very back row, keeping to himself, but he was there. Their eyes met for a second, as Sarah walked up the aisle and something quiet passed between them. It was not forgiveness, not just yet, but maybe it was the start of finding some peace. Caleb was waiting at the altar, holding his hat in his hands, with a look of pure love shining in his eyes. Ready? He asked her when she got to him. Ready? Reverend Harris said the old familiar words. They exchanged their vows, gave each other rings, and made their promises before God and the whole community. Sarah heard it all like she was in a dream, her eyes fixed on the man standing in front of her. By the power given to me, Reverend Harris finished up, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride. Caleb cupped her face in his rough hands and kissed her so gently, so respectfully, like she was something precious that he could not quite believe was really his. The whole church just burst into cheers. They walked back down that aisle together, hand in hand, and stepped out into the bright summer sun. The crowd gathered all around them, shouting congratulations and good wishes. Through all the happy noise, Sarah saw James standing off by himself, just watching them with a look on his face that was both happy and sad. She made up her mind right then. Slipping away from the crowd, she walked right over to her brother. James, he looked up, surprised. Sarah, I did not think. Thank you for coming. The words were hard to say, but they were true. It means something to me that you are here. I was not sure if you would want me to be. I am not sure either. She took a deep breath. But I am willing to find out. James's eyes got a little shiny. That is more than I deserve. Maybe so, but it is what I am offering you. She held out her hand to him. Come on and meet my husband the right way. He took her hand, and together they walked back over to where Caleb was waiting. Caleb, this is my brother James. James, this is my husband. The word felt new and wonderful on her tongue. Caleb Mallister. The two men looked at each other for a long moment. Then Caleb stuck out his hand. I have heard a whole lot about you, he said. Some of it was not good, but I have also heard you are trying to be a better man. I am. James gripped his hand with conviction. Every single day. Then that is what counts. Caleb looked over at Sarah. My wife here believes in giving folks a second chance. And so do I. But you need to understand this. If you ever cause her harm again, there will not be a third chance. I understand completely. James's voice was serious. And I accept your terms. The handshake was over, but something new had just started. It was fragile and uncertain, but it was real. Sarah looked at her husband, and then she looked at her brother, and she felt something that she had not felt for a very long time. Hope. Not the desperate kind of hope she had for escape, but the quiet, steady hope that comes from building something new. She was Sarah Mallister now. A wife, a partner, an equal. She had a real home, a loving husband, and maybe, just maybe, the start of a family once more. This was not the life she had ever pictured for herself. It was so much better. The first year of their marriage felt like a wonderful dream she never knew she was allowed to have. The ranch was flourishing under their combined efforts. Caleb grew the cattle herd, while Sarah took the neglected garden and made it into something beautiful. They worked from sunrise to sunset, falling into bed bone-tired every night. But it was a good kind of tired, the kind you feel from building a life together. Their partnership grew into something much deeper than either of them had ever imagined. They learned to read each other's rhythms, understand each other's silences, and know each other's needs. Caleb found out that Sarah needed some quiet time to herself in the mornings before she was ready to face the world. Sarah learned that Caleb sometimes woke up from terrible nightmares about the Comanche raid that took his family. She learned that the best thing she could do was just hold him close and wait for the shaking to stop. You never talk about them, she said quietly one night, after he had a particularly bad dream. Your family. Caleb was silent for a long time, his arm wrapped around her in the dark. It still hurts too much, he finally admitted, even after all this time. Will you tell me about them one day? One day. He leaned down and pressed a kiss into her hair. When I can find the right words. Letters kept going back and forth between Sarah and James. His writing became warmer and more confident as his life in Medicine Bow got better. The ranch was on its way back. He and a woman named Rebecca had announced they were getting engaged. He was becoming the kind of man their father would have been proud of. William still wrote from time to time, his letters always formal and careful, never quite getting too personal. A quiet warmth, and she knew they were truly connected. He was running most of the ranch now. Hearing him talk about cattle prices and weather fronts sounded so much like her father used to. She never once missed her old life. But some nights, when it was real quiet, she would wonder about the life she was supposed to have. Caleb found her staring out at the dusky sky one evening. "You are off in your thoughts again," he whispered, "just remembering things. Good memories or bad ones? A little of both." He wrapped his arms around her and she leaned into his chest. "Seems that is how life is not it?" When the leaves started to turn, Sarah felt a change in herself. For weeks she had been tired, a deep-down tired that sleep could not touch. She felt sick to her stomach in the mornings, and certain smells would just turn her inside out. She tried to dismiss it as just the season changing or being worn out from the harvest. But she had a feeling she knew what it was. She waited until she was absolutely sure. One evening after supper, they sat on the porch, watching the sun bleed all gold and red over the mountains. "I have got something to tell you," she began. The smile left his face, replaced with worry. "What is it? Are you okay?" "I am okay. I am better than okay." She took his hand gently and placed it right over her stomach, which was still as flat as a griddle. "We are going to have a baby." The words just floated there in the cool evening air. Caleb's face was a storm of emotions. First shock, then disbelief, then a flicker of hope, and finally a wave of pure joy that settled into something like reverence. "A baby?" he said, his voice thick. "Are you sure?" "Martha confirmed it this morning. Said it will be late spring." He pulled her in close, hugging her so hard she felt her feet lift off the porch boards. "A baby. We are having a baby. Are you happy about it?" "Happy?" He stepped back to look at her, and she saw tears rolling right down his dusty cheeks. "I am scared to death. I feel like I have been hit by a freight train. I have no idea how to be a good daddy." His voice cracked wide open. "But happy is not even the word for it. You will be a wonderful father." "How can you know that?" "Because you are a wonderful husband. Because you are the kind of man who hears a woman scream in the dark and comes running when any other man would have spurred his horse and gone the other way." She reached up and touched his cheek. "Because you have a bigger heart than anyone I know, even when you try so hard to hide it." He kissed her then, a long, slow kiss that promised a lifetime. "I love you," he whispered on her lips. "Both of you. We love you too." The news got around Silver Creek faster than a wildfire in a dry spell. Martha Crane showed up the very next day, her arms loaded down with soft fabrics and sewing patterns for little baby outfits. The wife of the rancher next door came by with plenty of advice and a hand-me-down cradle. Even Mr. Jenkins from the hotel made the trip out himself just to wish them well. "A new generation for the Mallister Ranch," he declared, shaking Caleb's hand like he was pumping water. "Your father would be mighty proud." Caleb stiffened just a little when he mentioned his father, but he kept a smile on his face. "Thank you, Mr. Jenkins. That truly means a lot to us." That night, Sarah wrote letters to James and William to tell them the news. A reply from James came back in about 2 weeks, full of happy words and a promise to come visit once the baby arrived. William's letter was not as long, but just as heartfelt. He offered to send some of their mother's old baby things that were packed away in the attic. "Things are really changing," Sarah said to Caleb, folding up William's letter. "With my family. It feels like we could be a real family again one day." "Would you want that?" "I think I would. Not what we used to be, because that is all gone now, but something brand new." She placed a hand on her belly. "This little one is going to have aunts and uncles and cousins. That is a whole lot more than I had after my mama and daddy passed. And more than I ever had after mine," Caleb added quietly. We are building something special, are not we? Sarah glanced around the small house they had made a home. She saw the curtains she had stitched by hand, the sturdy table Caleb had built, and the garden she could see right through the kitchen window. Something real. Something real, Caleb echoed. And it is all ours. The pregnancy went along just fine through the fall and into the cold of winter. Sarah's belly swelled up good and round, and soon she could feel the baby moving. At first it was just tiny flutters, like moths dancing inside her. Then came the kicks, some so strong they made her jump. Caleb would spend hours with his big hand resting on her stomach, talking to the little one tucked away in there. "Your mama is the toughest woman I have ever met," he would tell the baby. She ran barefoot in the snow to get away from her brothers. She faced down 3 armed men and did not have a thing to protect herself but her own voice. She is going to teach you how to be strong. "And you are going to teach this baby to be a big softy," Sarah would tease him back. "Well, somebody has got to do it." By February, Martha Crane had all but moved into their extra room. She insisted that a woman having her first baby needed somebody watching over her around the clock. Having her there was a comfort, but it was also tiring. She had a strong opinion on everything, from what Sarah ate to how she slept to the very second that the baby was going to make its appearance. "March," Martha announced with total certainty. "Early March, just by the looks of you." Doc Harrison had said late March. "That doctor does not know babies the way I know babies. It will be early March, you mark my words." And just as she said, Martha was right on the money. The labor started on the 2nd of March, a full 3 weeks before the doctor figured. Sarah woke up in the dead of night when a pain sliced clear across her belly. Her first thought was that Martha had gone too heavy on the pepper in the stew that night. But then a second pain hit, even stronger than the one before, and she knew for sure. "Caleb," she said, shaking his shoulder, "it is time." His eyes flew open. In the unsteady light of the lamp, she saw fear and resolve wash over his face. "How far apart are the pains?" "I do not know. Just a few minutes, maybe." "I will go get Martha." The hours that followed were a blur of pain and hard work. Martha took over right away, and her calm, no-nonsense way of doing things was a lifeline in all the turmoil. Caleb never left Sarah's side. He held her hand, mopped the sweat from her brow, and whispered words of encouragement, even when she yelled at him to just be quiet. "You are almost there," Martha said for what seemed like the 100th time. "Just one more good push." "Push! Give me everything you have left." Sarah dug down deep for that last bit of strength, a raw scream tearing out of her. Then came a sudden quiet, quickly broken by the tiny, angry wail of a new life. "It is a girl," Martha said, her voice heavy with feeling. "A beautiful, strong baby girl." She gently laid the crying infant on Sarah's chest, and Sarah felt a permanent shift deep inside her soul. A love so powerful and instant, it stole her breath. "Well, hello there," she whispered to the little red-faced, furious person in her arms. "Hello, my sweet girl." Caleb was suddenly right there beside her, with tears just streaming down his cheeks. "She is perfect," he breathed out. "Sarah, she is just absolutely perfect. She has your eyes. And Lord knows she has your stubborn streak. Just listen to that cry." Even though she was bone-tired, Sarah managed a laugh. "What are we going to name her?" They had gone back and forth on names for months, never settling on one. But now, gazing at this small human they made together, the answer felt plain as day. "Hope," Caleb said softly, "because that is what she is. Hope for this life we are building. Hope Mallister." Sarah tried the name on her tongue. "I love it." Then, Hope it is. The baby's cries began to quiet down as she found her mother's comfort, her little fingers clenching and unclenching on Sarah's skin. Sarah watched her daughter, feeling her own tears slide down her face. Just 1 year ago, she was running through the snow with nothing on her feet, sure that her life was finished. Now she held her own daughter. Her husband was right by her side, and their future was laid out in front of them like a long, open road. "Thank you," she said, looking right at Caleb. "For what? For hearing me scream? For showing up when any other man would have just kept on riding?" She held his gaze. "For giving me this life." He shook his head gently. "You gave it to yourself," he told her. "I just gave you a hand finding it." That first year of Hope's life flew by in a dizzying mix of nights without sleep, and a joy so big it filled the whole house. Sarah had never once pictured herself as a mother, but the job fit her like a glove she was always meant to wear. She learned how to read Hope's different cries, to know what she needed before she even knew, and to find a patience she never knew she had. Caleb was just as smitten, taking his turn in the dead of night, when Sarah was worn out, pacing the floorboards with a fussy Hope, and spending hours just watching her breathe. "You are going to spoil that child rotten," Sarah would warn him with a smile. "Well, that is my duty as her daddy. Your job is to make her strong. I figure we can do both." Martha Crane moved back to her place in town, but came by every week, bringing presents and wisdom in equal shares. The wives from the neighboring ranches would stop in all the time, and Hope soon became the little darling of Silver Creek. Everybody knew her name. Everybody had some advice on how to raise her. Everybody watched her grow with a kind of shared pride. "That one's going to be something else," Mrs. Jenkins declared one afternoon. "You can just see it in her eyes." "She is going to be whatever she sets her mind to be," Sarah answered. "That is all we could ever hope for." James and Rebecca came to visit when Hope was about 6 months old. Sarah had not seen her brother face to face since her wedding, and she was a little on edge about how it would all go. But James was different. The guilt that had been a shadow on his face a year ago had smoothed out into something calmer. He was a man who had done a bad thing and was trying his best to make it right. Rebecca was every bit as wonderful as he had said. She was warm and smart, with a quiet sort of strength that made Sarah think of Martha Crane. She fit right into the Mallister home as if she had been there all along, helping out with Hope and swapping stories about life out on the frontier. "She is just beautiful," James said, holding his niece for the very first time. Hope grabbed onto his finger and held on tight. "She's got a strong grip on her, that's for sure. She gets that from her mama. She gets a whole lot from her mama." James looked over at Sarah. "You've really built something special out here, Sarah. This whole ranch, this family. P would be so proud." "You really think so?" "I know so." James's voice was solid as a rock. "No matter what happened between us, no matter what Thomas did, P would be bursting with pride at the woman you've become. I'm sure of it." Sarah felt a wave of tears coming, but she blinked them away. "Thank you, James. That means more to me than you'll ever know." William came to visit the next spring just like he promised, with that box of their mother's baby keepsakes. He was just as stiff and proper as Sarah remembered, but she could see a real kindness hiding underneath all that formality. He sat for hours with Hope, telling her all the old Callahan family stories, about the grandparents she would never get to meet and a heritage that went back for generations. "It's important she knows her roots," William said. "Even if she never sets foot on that land, she'll know," Sarah promised him. "We'll make darn sure of it." The years after that just flew by in a hurry. Hope grew up to be a wild and spirited little girl, climbing trees before she could even walk right, always begging to get on a horse and asking questions that neither of her parents had an answer for. She had her mother's stubborn streak and her father's calm soul, a mix that made her a real handful, even at 4 years old. "That one's going to give us gray hairs before we're 50, Caleb remarked one evening, right after Hope nearly knocked herself out trying to fly off the barn roof. "She's going to move mountains," Sarah said back. "I just hope the world is ready for her." When Hope was 3, a second baby came along, a little boy they named Daniel after Caleb's daddy. He was a quieter child than his big sister, more of a thinker, happy as a clam to sit with a book of pictures while Hope was out running wild all over the ranch. They couldn't be more different, Sarah often marveled. But they're both ours, Caleb would say, and that's all that matters. The ranch got bigger as the years went on. They bought up more land, hired on some extra hands to help with the work, and even built a proper schoolhouse where Sarah taught the kids from Silver Creek after the town's teacher packed up and left. "Well, look at you, a regular pillar of the community," Martha Crane told her one day. "I reckon I learned from the best." Martha passed on peacefully in her sleep when Hope was 5. The whole town felt her loss, but it hit Sarah the hardest. Martha was the very first friend she had made in Silver Creek, the woman who'd looked right past her bruises and her ripped-up dress and saw the person hiding inside. At the funeral, Sarah stood up and spoke about Martha's goodness, her sharp mind, and her solid belief that every single person deserved a second chance at life. "She took me in when I did not have a thing to my name," Sarah said, her voice thick with unshed tears. "She saw something good in me when I could not see it for myself. Everything I have built, the person I have become, it all started right there with her." Caleb just held her hand while she let the tears fall afterward. He did not try to say anything to fix it. He just stayed there with her. "She was so proud of you," he said in a low voice. "She told me so the last time I saw her." "She told you that?" "She said you were like the daughter she never got to have. She said that watching you find your own strength was one of the greatest joys of her entire life." Sarah cried even harder when she heard that. But they were the kind of tears that heal, not the kind that leave you empty. Martha's spirit lived on in every woman Sarah helped, every second chance she gave out, and every bit of kindness she showed to a stranger just passing through Silver Creek. The cycle kept turning. One afternoon in the fall, when Hope was 7 and Daniel was 4, Sarah was out in her garden when she heard the sound of a wagon coming up the road. She looked up and saw a beat-up old thing, driven by a skinny woman with a bruised cheek and 2 small children huddled up close beside her. The woman's eyes were wide and full of fear, darting around the property like she was expecting trouble to jump out from behind every tree. Sarah knew that look. She had worn it on her own face once. She put down her gardening trowel and walked slowly over to the wagon, keeping her hands where they could be seen and her shoulders relaxed. "Are you folks all right?" she asked in a gentle voice. The woman jumped at the sound of the question. We are looking for—" Her voice broke. "Somebody told us there was a place out here. A place for folks who needed some help." "There is." Sarah reached a hand up to help the woman down from the wagon seat. "You found it." The woman's name was Mary, and her story was one Sarah knew all too well. A husband who had turned mean, a run for her life in the middle of the night, and nowhere else in the world to go. Sarah brought her inside without a second thought, getting a room ready in the main house, feeding the hungry children, and cleaning Mary's cuts and scrapes with the same soft touch that Martha had once used on her. "Why are you doing all this for me?" Mary asked her that night, asking the same question Sarah had asked all those years ago. "You do not even know who I am." "I know enough," Sarah said, sitting down on the edge of the bed. "I know how it feels to have to run, to be scared, and to think you have lost every last thing you own. How did you make it through?" "Somebody helped me. A stranger who heard me scream and came running when anyone else would have just kept on going." Sarah gave a small smile. "So now I am doing the same thing for you. But why? Because that is how we make this world a better place. One act of kindness at a time." Mary and her 2 children stayed for 3 months, right up until Sarah and Caleb found a safe way to get her to her sister's place out in California. On the morning she was leaving, Mary pushed a well-worn Bible into Sarah's hands. "It is all I have in the world to give you," she said with tears just pouring down her face. "But I need you to know that you saved my life, and one day I'm going to pass that kindness on to someone else." That is all I could ever ask, Sarah told her. She stood and watched the wagon until it was just a speck on the horizon, and she felt a sense of rightness settle deep down in her bones. This was her reason for being. This was why she had survived all of it, not just to make a good life for herself, but to help other people make their own. The years kept on passing, each one adding another story to the life that Sarah and Caleb had made together. Hope grew up to be a young woman who was every bit as fierce and strong-willed as her mother. She learned how to ride a horse like she was born to it, how to shoot straight, and how to help run the ranch. But she also found a deep love for books and for learning that took everyone by surprise. "I want to go to school," she declared on her 16th birthday. "A real school, back in the East." Sarah felt her heart do a little flip, the thought of her daughter going so far away. But then she remembered her own desperate scramble for freedom, her own battle just to choose a life for herself. "Well, then you ought to go," she said. And it felt like pulling a tooth to say it. You should have the life that you want for yourself. Hope's eyes welled up with tears. "You're not even going to argue with me?" "Why in the world would I argue? I ran barefoot through a blizzard to get away from a life I never asked for. How could I ever stand in the way of you choosing yours?" "I love you, Mama." "I love you too, Hope. I always will." Hope headed off to Boston that next fall. The letters she sent home were bursting with excitement and new things she was learning. She wrote about new friends, big ideas, and endless possibilities. She was growing into the woman she was always meant to be. And Sarah had never been more proud. Daniel, who was always the quieter, more thoughtful one, decided to stay closer to home. He started taking on more of the work around the ranch as Caleb got older, showing everyone he was a good and fair leader. "He sure does remind me of his father," Sarah said one evening. "He reminds me of you," Caleb answered. "All that quiet strength he's got." James and Rebecca had 3 of their own kids by then. They were Hope's cousins, bound together by blood and by choice. The whole clan would get together every Christmas at the Mallister Ranch, and the house would be filled with noise and laughter, and a whole lot of love. Even William would come sometimes, his formal shell finally starting to crack a little with age. He never did get married, but he seemed happy enough with his life at the Callahan Ranch, which was doing better than ever under his watchful eye. "We're quite a bunch, aren't we?" Sarah said one Christmas, taking in the whole crowded room. "After everything we've been through." "It's because of everything," Caleb corrected her gently. "We're a family. We're a family because we decided to be. And that's a bond that's stronger than blood will ever be." 20 years after she had run for her life through the snow, Sarah stood on the porch of her ranch. She watched the setting sun paint the mountains in colors of gold and deep red. Her hair had turned to silver now, and her face was etched with the lines of many years of both laughter and worry. Her body showed the signs of hard work and bringing children into the world and the simple passing of time. But her eyes were still the very same. They were still fierce, still full of resolve, still burning with the same fire that got her through that freezing night so long ago. Caleb came and stood beside her, moving a bit slower these days, his brown hair now more gray than not. He reached for her hand without a word, and they just stood there together in a comfortable quiet. "You thinking about that night?" he finally asked. "How'd you know?" "You always get that look on your face around this time of year, like you're seeing something a long way off." Sarah gave a little smile. "I was just thinking about how different everything could have been. When I ran away that night, I honestly thought my life was finished. I thought I had absolutely nothing left in this world. And now I have everything." She gave his hand a gentle squeeze. "A husband who loves me. Children who make me so proud. A town full of folks who feel like family. A life that I built with my own 2 hands. With a little bit of help. With a whole lot of help." She turned to look right at him. "You know, I never really thanked you properly." "For what?" "For hearing me scream. for riding your horse toward the sound of trouble instead of running from it, for offering me a partnership when all I had to bring to the table was my own broken self. Sarah, let me stop you right there. She reached up and touched his weathered cheek. You gave me a chance when nobody else would have. You believed in me when I couldn't even believe in myself. Everything I am today, everything I've built, it all started with you. No, it started with you, Caleb said, his voice firm. You were the one who ran. You were the one who fought back. You were the one who made the choice to keep on living when it would have been so much easier to just give up. I couldn't have made it by myself. You would have found a way. He sounded so certain. You are the strongest person I've ever known, Sarah Mallister. You always have been. They stood there together as the sun finally dipped down behind the mountains. Two people who had found one another in the dark and had managed to build something truly beautiful in the light. Got any regrets? Caleb asked softly. Not a one. Sarah leaned her head against his shoulder. Not a single one. Not even the tough times. Especially the tough times. They're what made me who I am. They're what brought me here to you. Well then, I suppose I should probably thank your brothers. Sarah let out a real laugh, one that was full and completely free. Now, I wouldn't go that far. No, I reckon not. A comfortable quiet settled over them again, one that felt as familiar as breathing. I love you, Sarah said. I love you too. From the very moment you stepped out from behind that big rock, I knew. Knew what? That you were about to change my entire life. He gently kissed her on the forehead. I just didn't have a clue how much. A letter showed up the next morning from Hope. It was full of news about her job as a teacher in Boston and had some hints about a young man she'd been spending time with. She's fixin' to get married, Sarah predicted, reading what wasn't written on the page. She's going to do whatever it is that makes her happy, Caleb answered. That's what we raised her to do. We raised her right. We raised her to pick her own road, just like you picked yours. Daniel came over for supper that evening with his wife and their brand-new baby boy, the very first grandchild. Sarah held the tiny little thing in her arms and felt like a long journey had finally come full circle. A year ago, she was running barefoot in the snow. Now, here she was, holding her grandson, while her husband smiled next to her and her children gathered all around. The woman who had been held down and hurt by her own family had grown into the heart of a new family, one built on love and free will and second chances. The woman who had once screamed into the empty darkness was now the one who answered when other women cried for help. The woman who started with nothing had become the one who gave everything she had. That night, long after the family had all gone home and the house was still, Sarah sat down at her desk and started a letter to Hope. She told her daughter the whole story of the night she escaped. She wrote about running through the snow with just a pistol and a prayer, about the stranger who heard her cry out and came running, about the life she had built from nothing but grit and a helping hand, and the stubborn choice to never ever give up. You come from a line of strength, she wrote. Never forget that. No matter what trials you face, no matter what choices you have to make, you come from a woman who lived through the unthinkable and then built something beautiful right out of the ashes. That is what I pass down to you. That is your legacy, and I cannot wait to see what you build with it. She sealed up the letter and put it aside to mail in the morning. Then she went to join her husband in their bed, curling up against his familiar warmth. Love you, Caleb mumbled, already half asleep. Love you too. Outside, the snow started to fall, laying a clean white blanket over the whole ranch. It was the same kind of snow that had once cut her feet and almost been the end of her 20 years ago. But tonight, it looked like a blessing. Tonight, it looked like home. Sarah Elizabeth Mallister closed her eyes and slept deeply, wrapped in love, rooted in a place where she belonged, and completely sure of one single thing. They had tried to hold her down. They had told her to break. But instead, she had risen up. She had built a life so full, so good, so beautiful, that no one could ever take it away from her again. That was her real triumph. That was her story. And it was just getting started. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful stories with valuable life lessons. Every narrative is crafted to entertain, inspire, and empower our audience. We believe that great stories can change lives, and we are committed to bringing you content that matters. Thank you for being part of our community.